The ancient stone corridors of Windsor Castle echoed with an unsettling rhythm that night. Princess Charlotte, now 16, and known for her spirited nature, had been experiencing strange episodes that concerned the entire royal household. What started as innocent mumbling in her sleep had escalated into something far more troubling. Lady Margaret Ashworth, Charlotte's primary lady-in-waiting, first noticed the peculiar behavior 3 weeks earlier. During what should have been peaceful slumber, the young princess began repeating a name with increasing intensity. "Tom Parker Bowles," she would whisper, then louder. "Tom Parker Bowles," until it became an urgent chant that penetrated the thick castle walls. The name belonged to Queen Camilla's eldest son from her first marriage, a food writer and critic who had always maintained a respectful distance from the core royal family. Tom Parker Bowles, now in his late 40s, had built his own successful career and rarely appeared at major royal functions. The connection between him and Princess Charlotte seemed non-existent, making her nocturnal fixation all the more mysterious. Dr. Elizabeth Thornton, the royal family's trusted physician, had been discreetly called to examine Charlotte after the episodes became nightly occurrences. During her initial consultation, she observed the princess during daylight hours and found her to be perfectly normal. Bright, articulate, and showing no signs of distress. However, the moment darkness fell and Charlotte's head touched her pillow, the strange ritual would begin. "Tom Parker Bowles, Tom Parker Bowles," Charlotte would repeat, her voice growing stronger with each iteration. The words seemed to come from somewhere deep within her subconscious, as if she were trying to communicate something urgent but couldn't quite grasp what it was during her waking hours. The situation became so concerning that King Charles himself was briefed on his granddaughter's condition. He sat in his private study, fingers drumming nervously on his mahogany desk as Dr. Thornton explained the situation. The idea that his beloved granddaughter was somehow fixated on his stepson created an uncomfortable dynamic within the family. Queen Camilla, when informed of the situation, felt a mixture of worry and confusion. She had always been fond of Charlotte, and the thought that her own son's name was somehow causing distress within the royal household troubled her deeply. She suggested that perhaps Tom should be made aware of the situation, though she wasn't sure what purpose it would serve. Meanwhile, the castle's security team, led by Captain James Morrison, began to take notice of the nightly disturbances. The princess's quarters were located in the east wing, and her increasingly loud chanting was beginning to affect the other residents. More concerning was the fact that Charlotte had started to sleepwalk during these episodes, wandering the corridors while continuing her repetitive chanting. Sarah Fleming, a junior member of the household staff, was the first to encounter Charlotte during one of these midnight wanderings. She had been returning from the kitchens when she spotted a figure in white moving slowly down the main corridor. As she approached, she realized it was Princess Charlotte, her eyes closed, but her lips moving in that familiar pattern. "Tom Parker Bowles. Tom Parker Bowles." The sight was both heartbreaking and frightening. Charlotte moved with purpose, as if she were searching for something or someone, but her unconscious state made it impossible to determine her destination. Sarah gently guided the princess back to her chambers, but not before noting that Charlotte's behavior seemed to be intensifying rather than diminishing with time. Dr. Thornton decided to conduct a sleep study, setting up monitoring equipment in Charlotte's bedroom to better understand what was happening during these episodes. The results were puzzling. Charlotte's brain activity showed patterns consistent with deep sleep, yet her physical movements and vocalizations suggested a state of heightened awareness. As the nights passed, the entire castle seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the familiar sound of Charlotte's voice echoing through the halls. The staff began to whisper among themselves, creating theories about what might be causing the princess's strange fixation. Some suggested it might be related to stress from her upcoming university preparations, while others wondered if there was some hidden connection between Charlotte and Tom Parker Bowles that no one was aware of. The situation reached a turning point when Charlotte's chanting became so loud that it could be heard several rooms away. Lady Margaret, who had been sleeping in an adjacent chamber to monitor the princess, was awakened by what sounded like shouting rather than the usual repetitive whispers. When she entered Charlotte's room, she found the princess sitting upright in bed, her eyes wide open but clearly still asleep, calling Tom Parker Bowles's name with an urgency that sent chills down Lady Margaret's spine. It was then that the decision was made to bring in additional security measures. The Royal Protection Unit, already on high alert due to the unusual circumstances, decided that if Charlotte's sleepwalking continued to escalate, they would need to implement more stringent safety protocols to ensure she didn't inadvertently harm herself during her nocturnal wanderings. Captain Morrison assigned his most trusted guard, Sergeant David Hayes, to maintain a discreet watch over Charlotte's quarters during the night hours. Sergeant Hayes was a decorated military veteran with 15 years of experience in royal protection, known for his ability to handle sensitive situations with both professionalism and compassion. On what would prove to be a pivotal night, Charlotte's behavior took an even more dramatic turn. Instead of simply repeating Tom Parker Bowles' name, she began to incorporate phrases and questions. "Where is Tom Parker Bowles?" she would ask the darkness. "Tom Parker Bowles must come," she would insist, her voice carrying an authority that seemed strange coming from someone who was clearly unconscious. The royal family was now genuinely concerned that Charlotte's condition might be more serious than initially thought. Plans were made to consult with specialists in sleep disorders and psychological trauma, though everyone hoped that whatever was causing these episodes would resolve itself before more drastic measures became necessary. Little did anyone know that the most dramatic chapter of this strange saga was about to unfold, and that Princess Charlotte's mysterious connection to Tom Parker Bowles was about to reveal itself in a way that would shock everyone involved and forever change the dynamics within the royal household. The night everything changed started like any other. Charlotte had gone to bed at her usual time, and the household staff had settled into their now familiar routine of monitoring her condition. Dr. Thornton had positioned herself in the nearby sitting room, ready to observe and document any unusual behavior, while Sergeant Hayes maintained his vigilant watch from the corridor outside Charlotte's chambers. At approximately 2:30 in the morning, Charlotte began her nightly ritual. But something was immediately different. Instead of the gradual buildup of her chanting, she launched directly into a loud, persistent calling of Tom Parker Bowles' name. Her voice carried an emotional intensity that hadn't been present before, as if she were pleading or desperately trying to reach someone who was far away. Dr. Thornton quickly entered the room to check on Charlotte and was startled to find her standing by the window, still clearly asleep, but gesturing as if she were trying to communicate with someone outside. The moonlight illuminated her face, revealing an expression of deep concentration and concern that seemed far too mature for her 16 years. "Tom Parker Bowles," Charlotte called out toward the window. "Tom Parker Bowles, please listen. Tom Parker Bowles, you must understand." Her words were becoming more complex, more urgent, and Dr. Thornton realized that this wasn't just random repetition but what appeared to be one side of a conversation. Sergeant Hayes, hearing the escalation from his position in the corridor, quietly entered the room to assess the situation. He had been briefed on Charlotte's condition but had never witnessed one of her episodes firsthand. The sight of the young princess apparently trying to communicate with someone invisible was both touching and deeply unsettling. As the minutes passed, Charlotte's agitation seemed to increase. She moved away from the window and began pacing around her room, her hands gesturing as if she were explaining something important. "Tom Parker Bowles knows," she said with conviction. "Tom Parker Bowles has the answer. Tom Parker Bowles must tell them." Dr. Thornton attempted to approach Charlotte, hoping to gently guide her back to bed. But the princess seemed to sense the presence and became more animated. "Tom Parker Bowles is coming," she announced suddenly. "Tom Parker Bowles will be here soon. Tom Parker Bowles must not be stopped." This new development sent alarm bells through both Dr. Thornton and Sergeant Hayes. The idea that Charlotte believed Tom Parker Bowles was actually coming to the castle was concerning on multiple levels. Hayes immediately used his radio to alert Captain Morrison, who was monitoring the situation from the security headquarters. "Sir, we have an escalation," Hayes reported quietly. "The princess appears to believe that Tom Parker Bowles is en route to the castle. She's more agitated than previous nights, and her statements are becoming more specific and urgent." Captain Morrison, already on edge due to the unusual circumstances surrounding Charlotte's condition, made the decision to increase security measures immediately. While he didn't believe that Tom Parker Bowles was actually approaching the castle, Charlotte's condition was clearly deteriorating, and he needed to be prepared for any possibility. Meanwhile, in her chambers, Charlotte had moved to her bedroom door and was reaching for the handle. "Doctor," Thornton quickly intervened, gently placing her hand over Charlotte's to prevent her from leaving the room while she was sleepwalking. "Tom Parker Bowles is at the gate," Charlotte said with absolute certainty. "Tom Parker Bowles needs to enter. Tom Parker Bowles has something important to say." Her voice had taken on an almost prophetic quality, as if she were receiving information from some supernatural source. The situation became even more perplexing when Charlotte suddenly stopped trying to leave her room and instead moved to her writing desk. Still clearly asleep, she picked up a pen and began writing rapidly on a piece of paper. "Doctor." Thornton watched in amazement as Charlotte filled line after line with text, all while continuing to murmur Tom Parker Bowles' name. When Charlotte finally set down the pen and returned to her bed, Dr. Thornton carefully examined what she had written. The text was surprisingly coherent for someone who was unconscious, but its content was cryptic and troubling. Charlotte had written about secrets hidden within the castle walls, about truths that needed to be revealed, and about Tom Parker Bowles being the key to understanding something that would affect the entire royal family. Dr. Thornton immediately contacted King Charles, despite the early hour. The king, who had been unable to sleep due to his concern for Charlotte, listened carefully as the doctor described the night's events and read portions of what Charlotte had written. "This is becoming something beyond a simple sleep disorder," Dr. Thornton admitted. "Charlotte appears to be accessing information or feelings that she's not consciously aware of. The specificity of her statements about Tom Parker Bowles suggests there may be something we're not understanding about their connection, or about something he represents to her subconscious mind." King Charles made the difficult decision to contact Tom Parker Bowles directly. While it seemed unlikely that Camilla's son would have any insight into Charlotte's condition, the persistence and specificity of her fixation suggested that involving him might be the only way to understand what was happening. Tom Parker Bowles was understandably confused when he received the early morning call from the king's private secretary. He had always maintained a respectful but distant relationship with the royal family, focusing on his own career and family life. The idea that Princess Charlotte was somehow fixated on him was both flattering and deeply concerning. "I've had no interaction with Charlotte beyond the usual family gatherings," Tom explained during his phone conversation with King Charles. "We've exchanged pleasantries at Christmas and other events, but nothing that would explain this kind of intense focus. I'm as mystified as you are." However, Tom did agree to come to Windsor Castle later that day to see if his presence might somehow help resolve Charlotte's condition. He was willing to do whatever was necessary to help the young princess, even if he couldn't understand how he had become part of her psychological distress. As dawn broke over Windsor Castle, Charlotte finally fell into a peaceful sleep, her face relaxed and showing no signs of the intense emotions that had driven her behavior throughout the night. Dr. Thornton remained nearby, monitoring her vital signs and hoping that the coming day would bring some answers to the mystery that had engulfed the royal household. The staff whispered among themselves as they went about their morning duties, all of them aware that something significant was building toward a climax. The very walls of the ancient castle seemed to hold their breath, waiting for the arrival of Tom Parker Bowles and whatever revelation his presence might bring. Nobody could have predicted that Charlotte's condition was about to lead to a discovery that would shake the foundation of everything they thought they knew about the royal family's history, and that the young princess's mysterious connection to Tom Parker Bowles was just the beginning of a much larger and more complicated story that had been hidden for decades. Tom Parker Bowles arrived at Windsor Castle on a gray afternoon, his mind racing with questions about why Princess Charlotte had become so fixated on him. He was escorted to a private sitting room where King Charles, Queen Camilla, and Dr. Thornton were waiting to brief him on the situation before he met with Charlotte. "We're hoping that seeing you might provide some closure for Charlotte," King Charles explained. "Dr. Thornton believes that your presence could either resolve her condition or help us understand what's triggering these episodes." Charlotte had been awake for several hours, and for the first time in weeks, she seemed completely normal during daylight hours. She ate breakfast, completed her studies, and showed no signs of the intense fixation that had been plaguing her nights. However, as the afternoon wore on and Tom's arrival grew closer, she began to show signs of restlessness that concerned Dr. Thornton. When Tom was finally brought to meet Charlotte in the garden pavilion, The reaction was immediate and startling. The moment Charlotte saw him, her eyes widened with recognition, but not the polite acknowledgement of a familiar family member. Instead, she looked at him as if she had been searching for him her entire life. "You're here," she said simply, her voice carrying a mixture of relief and urgency. "I knew you would come. We need to talk about the documents." Tom was completely bewildered. "What documents, Charlotte? I'm afraid I don't understand what you're referring to." Charlotte's demeanor suddenly shifted, becoming more intense and focused than anyone had seen her in recent memory. "The documents in the hidden compartment, behind the portrait of King George III in the library. You're the only one who can access them because of your connection to both families." Dr. Thornton and King Charles exchanged worried glances. Charlotte was speaking with a clarity and certainty that suggested she wasn't experiencing a psychological episode, but rather seemed to have access to specific information that she shouldn't possess. "Charlotte," King Charles said gently, "what do you know about these documents? How do you know about any hidden compartment?" "I've been dreaming about them for months," Charlotte replied, never taking her eyes off Tom. "But they weren't really dreams. They were memories, but not my memories. Someone was trying to tell me something, and the only way they could reach me was through sleep." Tom felt a chill run down his spine. His late grandmother on his mother's side had worked at Windsor Castle decades ago. Long before his mother married Prince Charles, she had been a lady's maid and had often told him stories about the castle's secret passages and hidden compartments, though he had always assumed they were just entertaining tales for a young boy. "My grandmother used to work here," Tom said slowly. "She told me stories about hidden spaces in the walls, but I thought they were just fairy tales." Charlotte nodded eagerly. "Lady Eleanor Shand. She was your grandmother. And she was also the keeper of a secret that she was supposed to pass down through your family. But she died before she could tell you everything, so she found another way to make sure the truth would come out." The mention of his grandmother's name sent shockwaves through Tom. Lady Eleanor had indeed worked at the castle, and she had died when he was only 12, taking with her many stories, and what Tom had always assumed were harmless castle legends. King Charles was now deeply concerned. The idea that Charlotte was somehow channeling information from a deceased castle employee was beyond anything he had prepared for. "Charlotte, how could you possibly know about Tom's grandmother?" "Because she's been trying to communicate with someone in the family for 30 years, Charlotte replied matter-of-factly. "The documents she hid contain information about a royal marriage that was kept secret, and about children who were never acknowledged. She promised to protect the evidence until the right time came to reveal the truth." Dr. Thornton was frantically taking notes, trying to document what appeared to be either an elaborate psychological construction or something far more mysterious than anyone had anticipated. Tom felt compelled to act on Charlotte's information, despite the apparent impossibility of the situation. "If there really are documents behind the portrait in the library, we should look," he said. "If Charlotte is wrong, then we'll know this is all part of her condition. But if she's right." The group made their way to the castle library, where a portrait of King George III hung prominently on the east wall. Tom approached the painting with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity, remembering his grandmother's stories about secret mechanisms and hidden switches. Following Charlotte's precise instructions, Tom pressed on a specific area of the frame, and to everyone's amazement, a small panel slid open, revealing a narrow compartment behind the portrait. Inside was a leather portfolio that looked like it had been hidden for decades. The discovery sent shockwaves through everyone present. King Charles carefully removed the portfolio and opened it to reveal documents, letters, and photographs that dated back to the early 1990s. The papers detailed a secret marriage between a minor royal and someone outside the family, along with evidence of children born from that union who had been quietly provided for but never publicly acknowledged. As King Charles examined the documents more closely, it became clear why Lady Eleanor had felt the need to preserve this information. The papers revealed financial arrangements, property transfers, and legal agreements that had been kept from the official royal records, all bearing signatures that included several high-ranking members of the royal household. Charlotte watched the adults process this information with a calm expression, as if a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "Lady Eleanor wanted the family to know the truth," she said. She believed that secrets like this eventually become poison if they're kept too long. She chose me to deliver her message because she knew I would be listened to, and she knew Tom would be the key to finding the evidence. Tom was overwhelmed by the realization that his grandmother had orchestrated this revelation from beyond the grave, using Charlotte as a messenger to ensure that long-buried truths would finally come to light. The documents would require extensive legal review and would likely have implications for the royal family's official history. Dr. Thornton was amazed to observe that as soon as the documents were discovered and the truth was revealed, Charlotte's demeanor completely normalized. The intense fixation on Tom Parker Bowles's name disappeared, and she seemed to return to being a typical 16-year-old princess with no memory of her nocturnal episodes. That night, for the first time in weeks, Charlotte slept peacefully through the entire night without uttering Tom Parker Bowles's name even once. The mysterious episodes that had plagued her for so long had ended as suddenly as they had begun, leaving everyone to wonder about the true nature of what they had witnessed. Captain Morrison and his security team were briefed on the general resolution of the situation, though the specific details of the discovered documents remained highly confidential. Sergeant Hayes, who had witnessed Charlotte's most dramatic episode, was left with a profound respect for the mysterious ways in which the past could reach into the present. The documents themselves were secured and became the subject of careful study by royal historians and legal experts. While their contents would never be made public, they provided crucial context for understanding certain decisions and arrangements that had been made during a particularly complex period in royal family history. Tom Parker Bowles returned to his normal life, but with a new appreciation for his grandmother's wisdom and a deeper understanding of his own connection to the royal family's hidden history. He had served as the key to unlocking not just a physical compartment, but a much larger secret that had been waiting decades for the right moment to be revealed. Charlotte, meanwhile, resumed her regular routine as if nothing unusual had ever happened. When asked about her recent experiences, she claimed to remember only fragments of strange dreams but nothing that explained her intense episodes. Whether this was a psychological defense mechanism or genuine amnesia remained unclear to Dr. Thornton, who continued to monitor Charlotte's well-being. The royal household gradually returned to normal, but with a new awareness that the ancient walls of Windsor Castle held many secrets, and that sometimes the past found ways to communicate with the present through channels that defied conventional understanding. The dramatic events surrounding Charlotte's mysterious condition became a carefully guarded family story, adding another layer to the complex tapestry of royal family lore. In the end, what had started as a concerning medical condition had transformed into a revelation that brought healing not just to Charlotte, but to a family secret that had been waiting 30 years for resolution. Lady Eleanor Shand's final act of service to the royal family had been completed, thanks to an extraordinary partnership between her grandson and a young princess who had somehow become the vessel for delivering a message across the boundaries of life and death.